Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Preston here, and this is going to be uh another nighttime video. So, so if I'm talking more lower, that's the reason why is because this is another nighttime video and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But this is a preview and prediction for Keyshawn Davis versus Jamaine Ortiz, and yeah, and stuff like that, so that is what this fight is gonna be and stuff like that, and I'm definitely looking forward for this fight, and I've been waiting for me to do this, but but there was like some other boxing on Showbox and stuff, so that kind of like took my distraction for a sec, but then I also watched the press conference and everything, but it was more of a busy day and stuff like that of watching sports and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and stuff like that, but yeah, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But basically, y'all. But yeah, man, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, this is definitely gonna be an entertaining fight and stuff like that, and I'm definitely looking forward for this fight and stuff like that, again. And I'm definitely looking forward for Keyshawn Davis's, comeback fight, and this is a good comeback fight, and he did have a good fight before. He did have a good competition before with going against Ivan Baranchik, or not, was it or Dennis Baranchik, excuse me, and stuff like that, and he won that fight in an impressive fashion, but then what happened with with the situation when Keyshawn Davis and the whole Davis brothers jumped Amir Albright and stuff like that, because Amir Albright defeated I think it was Kelvin Davis, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And they were just big time salty, and jumped and beat up on Amir Albright, in his locker room and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And I don't know if he got arrested, but I know that somebody got arrested. I think it was Kelvin Davis, because I don't know, and shit. Like, I don't know who was like the first like initiator. I think it was Kelvin Davis that was the first initiator, and stuff like that. If I'm guessing, I'm not very sure, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But I believe it was Kelvin Davis and stuff like that. That started everything. So, I mean, so at the same time, I mean, there was an excuse that Keyshawn Davis was just trying to defend his brother, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And that's the thing and stuff like that. But but yeah, and stuff like that. But Jamaine Ortiz, this is definitely a good step up fight for Keyshawn Davis, because Jamaine Ortiz is definitely a good boxer. Definitely has great footwork, definitely has a great jab. Definitely has great rhythm with his boxing. This is definitely going to be a tricky fight for Keyshawn Davis. And stuff like that. You know what I mean? But at the same time, as you can see, and stuff like that, Keyshawn Davis is the taller fighter. You know, and Keyshawn Davis is the lengthier fighter. So overall, Keyshawn Davis, I mean, he is the more bigger fighter, but the thing is with Keyshawn, he's kind of a big lightweight, and especially with like lengthy, like he got some long arms as a lightweight, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and stuff like that, but but yeah, and stuff like that, so Keyshawn, and stuff like that, he'll definitely have, a size advantage and stuff like that, when it comes down to, in this fight, because usually when it comes down to Keyshawn, when he fights people and stuff like that, like he usually, has a size advantage over people and stuff like that when he fights, his competition and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and stuff like that, But also, like, do you remember that fight between Joseph Adorno and Jamaine Ortiz? Like, I'm just saying, like that fight was like some years ago, and shit like that, like that fight was like what, like, like 6 years ago. That fight probably was like maybe 5 years ago or something, like, but That fight was kind of a long time ago, but I remember when that fight happened and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And Jamaine Ortiz got lucky with that win, and stuff. And kind of the same thing with Joseph Adorno, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But like Jamaine Ortiz got dropped three times against Joseph Adorno, and he got up, and then he still won rounds, back to back rounds, and stuff like that, and stuff. So, and the reason why that fight was a draw and stuff like that, because when it comes down to rounds, Jermaine Ortiz won the rounds. But when it came down to knockdowns, that was Joseph Adorno, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So. And knockdowns is a very important thing when it comes down to boxing, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And that's the thing and stuff like that. Just like with the UFC, like takedowns and and just grappling in general, that's a very effective thing in the UFC and stuff like that, but in boxing, knockdowns is a very important thing and stuff like that, and boxing IQ and cardio and all that, but but like you can easily get swing rounds for yourself when um when you get three knockdowns. But I'm just saying, I remember that fight, and that was a good ass fight though, between Jermaine Ortiz and Joseph Adorno and stuff like that. And honestly, in the future, like I wouldn't mind if they went against each other again. And if they went against each other again, I mean, like, you never really know because, I mean, styles make fights, to be honest with you, so, I mean, you never really know. And I feel like in that fight, it's just, styles make fights and stuff like that. But I feel like going into that fight and stuff, I still would probably favor Jamaine Ortiz, only because it's just he got strong boxing IQ, he got quick hands, and he also got power, and stuff like that, and it's just a matter of how he can land it, and stuff like that, but enough blabbering, and shit like that, but, but yeah, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But, but basically, like, in this fight and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Good fight. Both fighters are damn. Like, Jamaine Ortiz is 29. I thought he was, like, older than that. I thought he was, like, 30, some or some shit, but 29, what I mean? Like, that boy is still fresh. But yeah, and stuff like that, but Keyshawn Davis, 26. Jamaine Ortiz, 29. Keyshawn Davis was with a record of 13 wins, 0 losses, 0 draws, with, I believe it's 10 wins coming by way of knockout. And then Jamaine Ortiz, 20 wins with 2 losses, and that one draw, which was to Joseph Adorno, and yeah, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But and yeah, and stuff like that, but let me see how many knockouts Keyshawn Davis has. Alright, so Keyshawn Davis, he has a record of 13 wins, 0 losses, 0 draws, with 9 wins coming by way of knockout instead of 10. I thought it was 10. I thought that Dennis Baranchek was his 10th knockout, but Jamaine Ortiz has 20 wins, 10 wins coming by way of knockout, with 2 losses and 1 draw. Like I said, that draw was to Joseph Adorno, and yeah, but his 2 losses came from Vasily Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez. That's what his 2 losses came from, which was to 2 really good fighters, and stuff like that, and 2 fighters who fought each other, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But I never knew that Jamaine Ortiz is a 4.5 star. Like, that's pretty damn good, Like, that's really good, so, like, props to Jamaine Ortiz, man. And now that I'm realizing it, even Keyshawn Davis is going to 140. Oh yeah, Gervonta, bro, you gotta move up and weight, bro. I'm sorry, man. Like, you gotta move up and weight, Gervonta. Like, for real, bro. You have to move up and weight, dude. Like, I'm just saying, like literally, man. Like, there's no opportunity for you at 135, bro. Keyshawn's now going up in weight, Everybody's going up in weight, bro. You have to go up in weight, Javante. Like, I'm just saying, like, you have no other choice but to go up in weight, bro. And stuff like that. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying, man, and stuff. You know what I mean? But yeah, man, and shit like that. You know what I mean? But bro, and shit. Like, it's just there's literally no opportunity no more for Javante. Like literally, man. Like I wonder if he's even gonna do that, or if he's gonna be like, or if he's gonna like seriously retire. You know what I mean? Like, even though, I mean, if he retires, I mean, I can understand, because I mean, Javante's been boxing for for like over 10, like, has been pro for like over 10 years. You know what I mean? So at the same time, that's the thing. But he still has a lot to prove, though. Like a lot to prove, bro. Like, it's just like, I'm just saying, like, he can't end his career like this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But but yeah, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? He can't end his career like this, bruh. And stuff like that. But yeah, man, and stuff like that. So you got some things to consider, Javante. Because, man, dude, like, all these opportunities, man, are slipping away, bro. And stuff like that. You know what I mean? So you gotta quickly make your your move, man. And stuff like that. You know what I mean? But yeah, and stuff like that. But on to what these fighters need to do to winning this fight. And we are going to start off with Jamaine Ortiz. What Jamaine Ortiz needs to do to winning this fight is that, you know, he needs to fight his own fight and fight smarter, because the one thing with Keyshawn will sometimes leaves his hands low and stuff like that, and when you're going against a fighter like like Jamaine Ortiz, you can't really be leaving your hands very low, and stuff like that, even though he does got quick footwork and he does got quick awareness to knowing how to block punches, so I mean, overall, I mean, he does know what he's doing and stuff like that, but you have to be already, you have to be already like, you ready with your hands up and everything when you're fighting somebody like, like Jamaine Ortiz, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and stuff like that, but yeah, and stuff like that, so he can't be fighting with his hands low and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing, because if he fights with his hands low and stuff like that, like, Jamaine Ortiz is just gonna jab him all night long. Cause then the one thing that Keyshawn's gonna really have to figure out is how to really get into the range of Jamaine Ortiz. Cause Jamaine Ortiz ain't no bitch, bro. And shit like that, and the one thing is, it's not easy to get into his range. It was even really hard for Vasily Lomachenko to get into his range and stuff like that, and it took a bunch of shots from Jamaine Ortiz, to hit Vasily to get any success, and stuff like that, so I'm just saying and stuff like that, so yeah, man, and stuff like that. So this is gonna be a fight, man, and stuff like that, because if he can't figure out how to get into that range with of Jamaine Ortiz, it's definitely gonna be a tough fight, and stuff like that. But the one thing is that he does have longer arms and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So the one thing is that he can counter and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And when he counters and stuff like that, you know what I mean? He has more power than Keyshawn Davis, or than Jamaine Ortiz, and stuff like that, so since he does, sorry about that, y'all, but yeah, and stuff like that, because one thing with Keyshawn Davis, because he does have more power than Jamaine Ortiz, you know what I mean? So at the same time and stuff like that, you know what I mean? He could definitely make it, very difficult, I mean, Keyshawn could definitely make it very difficult for Jamaine Ortiz, because then after that, like, how is he going to be able to get into the range and stuff? But the one thing is that even Vasily Lomachenko had longer arms too. He had like a 69, 70-inch reach. I think it was a 69-inch reach. I think it was the same exact reach as as Jimmy Ortiz. But the one thing is that, as is that, like, Vasily knows how to, utilize great distance managing, inside managing, and stuff like that, and Vasily's kind of a lengthy fighter overall, because he has more of a longer torso and everything and stuff. So I mean, he still knows how to get the job done from far range for his own length of arms and stuff like that, because he also has quick footwork. So in that kind of way, Jamaine Ortiz still put up a good fight. So I mean, I think Jamaine Ortiz should be able to overcome that, pretty well and shit like that. At least that's what I would assume and shit like that from all the game that he's trying to talk and shit like that. You know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit like that. You know what I mean? But yeah, man, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But that's what these fighters need to do, man. And just, and Keyshawn keep streets out of boxing. I mean, at the same time and shit like that, you know what I mean? Like like that's the thing, but it's just you can't bring the streets into boxing like that, you know what I mean? Like, you can't be like, jumping niggas and shit like that because you lost or anything. You gotta be a man about it, bro, and shit like that. You gotta go on to the next one, you feel me? And that's the thing and shit like that, But yeah, and stuff like that, So it's more of kind of a big mentality thing for Keyshawn Davis, you know what I mean? Definitely a big mentality thing for Keyshawn Davis and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit like that, you know what I mean? But but yeah, and stuff like that, but that is the thing and stuff like that, but yeah, but the next thing and shit like that, who do I truly think is gonna win this fight? You know what I mean? Who do I truly think is gonna win this fight? I think the early rounds and stuff like that, is gonna be it's gonna be I mean, like, both fighters got game and shit, but it's gonna be hard for me to not to pick Keyshawn. But I'm gonna pick Keyshawn Davis in the early rounds. I'm gonna say in the mid rounds, I'm gonna say it's gonna be also Keyshawn Davis, I would say. But then I would say in the later rounds, I think that Jamaine Ortiz is gonna be looking good. Is gonna be looking pretty good. But at the same time, I feel like that Keyshawn Davis, is going to capitalize the later rounds, in my opinion. And, because I do see, where Jamaine is going to make, like, some tough rounds. But, Keyshawn is young and fresh, bro. Like, if this dude fought Lomachenko when he was younger, like, this dude probably, like, would have ended up getting stopped by Lomachenko. Like, let's be for real, or just, like, it would have been more convincing, of a beatdown for Vasily Lomachenko. Keyshawn Davis is literally in his prime, bro, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and stuff like that, like, he's literally in his prime, and stuff like that, so yeah, and shit like that, you know what I mean? So that's the thing, man, shit like that, and he ain't no slouch, bro. Like, he ain't no slouch, Keyshawn Davis, bro. And shit like that, you know what I mean? Same for Jamaine Ortiz, he ain't no slouch. But Keyshawn Davis, and shit like that, is gonna be abducted, to a high level in the rankings for a reason. And there's gonna be a reasoning why, people are gonna be more ranking him more higher and shit like that after this fight. Because, I see a fighter that's very tough, a fighter that has a lot of heart, and shit like that, a lot of fire in them and shit like that, you know what I mean? And they just want to let this out during fight night. And I just don't think, you know, uh, I just don't think that Jamaine Ortiz really has what it is. You know what I mean? I just like, because he knows how to fight, man. I mean, he knows how to box, but my nigga, like, you literally got rocked by Joseph Adorno, bro. Like, what the fuck do you think is gonna happen if you try to stand in there and shit like that, or if you get caught clean by Keyshawn Davis? Like, I'm just saying, like, this ain't no Vasily Lomachenko either in this type of standpoint. Because the one fact that I'm pretty sure that a lot of people should know is that Keyshawn Davis has more power than Vasily Lomachenko. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, and stuff like that. So yeah, and stuff like that. So it's not going to be as easy of a fight, for Jamaine Ortiz. But at the same time, Jamaine Ortiz is also fresh. You know what I mean? But it's mainly his skill set though. That there's certain things that like, because I mean he's good and shit like that. But it's just more of like at the same time, it's just you know. It's just it's just there's always fighters that's better, you know what I mean, and but it's just at the same time you never know, man. Because Jamaine Ortiz, I feel like he's that type of fighter that it's a matter of time until he's gonna get a really really good win that's gonna really turn around his career, and shit like that. You know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit like that. Because he's been getting good fights or really really tough fights, and if he gets that right opportunity, bro, and shit like that, that right win and shit like that, I feel like people are gonna really talk about him, bro. Because I mean, he does have a good resume. I mean, he fought Teofimo Lopez. He fought, Vasily Lomachenko. He fought Joseph Adorno. Um, you know, and now, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? He's going to be fighting Keyshawn Davis, and stuff like that, So I'm just saying and stuff like that. I feel like, if he actually does win this fight, or if let's say if Keyshawn controversially wins, but people does knew that he won, or if it was a draw or whatever the fuck and shit like that, you know what I mean? I feel like, and shit like that, that's gonna really boost up his career where people are gonna really actually respect Jamaine Ortiz, and, and give him title fights in fights and shit like that, because I know this is a title, or I know this isn't a title fight, but this is basically a title fight, and he's been in title fights and shit, but I'm just saying a reasonable title fight that, that is a 50-50 fight, or a fight that he's more favorable to winning, and shit like that, you know what I mean, and that's the thing and stuff like that, you know what I mean, but yeah, and stuff like that, but overall, when it all said and done and stuff like that, you know what I mean? My prediction is my prediction, man. And yeah, man, and shit like that, you know what I mean? Because at the same time, it's just, this is youth on youth. And I feel like in this fight, this is a youth fighter right here. This isn't a fighter that's almost going to be retired. So this is going to be a quick fighter. But that's going to be, I mean, this can be a fighter that's going to be having quick punches, a fighter with quick footwork, and most importantly, a fighter with tons of power and overall more power than Vasily Lomachenko. So in that kind of case of scenario, my final prediction for this fight is going to be Keyshawn Davis by, I would say, a unanimous decision, or I would say a late round stoppage. And yeah, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And yeah, so that's my final prediction for this fight. I got Keyshawn Davis by a unanimous decision or a late round stoppage. If I'm going to edge towards one and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Honestly, like, I feel like Keyshawn could honestly get the stoppage in this fight, to be honest with you, and shit like that. So I'm going to just lean more towards the stoppage, so if it comes down to like me picking one out of a stoppage in the decision, I am going to be picking a Keyshawn Davis late round stoppage. And yeah, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But yeah, but thank y'all for watching this video. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'm Preston. Peace out, man. But yeah, but one last thing. Why do they keep putting Jamaine Ortiz against really tough ass fighters? Like, I'm just saying, like, you know, I feel like I could really pick Jamaine Ortiz in a lot of these fights that are more 50-50 for him and stuff like that. Why don't you guys make fights that are more 50-50 for him that, and make it a title fight? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, and stuff like that, but it's also because he always be calling out these tough ass fighters though too, and shit like that. You know what I mean? Like, like Jermaine, like you need to pick your right match, bro. Because it's just like, because I think, because he's a lot better than what he was before. But I just feel like he got to fight the right match. Like, I feel like he keeps going against too tough of fighters, bro. And shit like that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, so I feel like he needs to start being, after this fight, he needs to start being in more even, like 50-50 fights in like a title fight, but make it more 50-50 and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit. Overall, this is a good fight. And if he does make it tough and potentially does win, I mean, congratulations. And that would be crazy. But I'm just saying at the same time, like, it's just they need to put him against more like 50-50 fights and stuff like that, because I know, Keyshawn, I mean, like, he has more experience than Keyshawn, and there's things that you can test Keyshawn on, but at the same time, like, you know, I just don't see him beating Keyshawn, and I don't see it being close, man. I just see Keyshawn being on a different level than Jamaine Ortiz at the end of the day. And then with Teofimo Lopez, Vasily Lomachenko, all three of them all three of them are just on a completely different level than Jamaine Ortiz. And I'm just saying, and he's just, and he's always fighting these tough ass fighters, you know what I mean? But yeah, but if that's his own decision, that was his own decision, you know what I mean? But yeah, but again, thank y'all for watching this video. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'm Preston. Peace out, y'all.